agricultura. Fidel, me recuerdo en esta hora de muchas cosas, de cuando te conocí en casa de María Antonia, de cuando me propusiste venir, de toda la tensión de los preparativos. Un día pasaron preguntando a quién se debía avisar en caso de muerte, y la posibilidad real del hecho nos golpeó a todos. Después supimos que era cierto, que en una revolución se triunfa o se muere.
Well, I don't really have TV right now, so I haven't been keeping up on the current news.
You think it's current there?
Yeah.
After 40 years, I mean, it's kind of pointless at this point, you know. We had problems with them in the 60s during the Cuban Missile Crisis, but come on, like, I mean, sure, there's communism still going on there, but at the same point in time, you know, communism really isn't affecting our country to any great deal anymore. McCarthy's been dead for how long? It's the workers, the people who make things that are suffering from American imperialism once again.
La pesca submarina es un deporte que no se puede sostener porque es muy acaba con las especies.
The Cuban mentality. Cuban mentality is our normal mentality is to have embargo. I think that we are comfortable living with embargo because we always have to live with embargo. And now someday they say, the embargo is off, you can go wherever you want, you can go to the state.
The United States people are responding the way they respond to most things in other countries, which is not to pay much attention. That's true across the board of just Americans' interest in what is going on, particularly in poverty-stricken countries abroad.
How do you feel about the United States embargo is against Cuba?
I think it's pretty stupid. It's been 30 years, hasn't it?
40.
40? Okay, I'm 10 years off.
A lot of it is actually, I'm sure it's just almost solely based on the very loud political protests of Cuban immigrants who, like I said, have a personal involvement with the issue, whereas it's really, it is harming the innocent Cuban people, and I'm sure a lot of good would be done by lifting the embargo and allowing American dollars to, you know, help people as opposed to just starving them out.
We selectively use embargoes and sanctions against countries like Iraq and Libya, and we have moved to normalize with more long-standing places like Vietnam. Cuba's a funny one because there are so many Cuban immigrants who have come to the United States and become extremely active in the anti-Castro movement and have donated major amounts of money to a lot of powerful politicians. And by doing so, as we saw in Ilion last year, they build a political base that makes it difficult to normalize things with Cuba.
estoy súper feliz porque esta niña mía está aquí. Porque no está en el embargo cubano.
Sí, tremendo.
No está bajo el embargo. Y siempre quise que viniera precisamente. Another thing that I was thinking is, for instance, nowadays they have this problem of the human rights and Cuba, condemn Cuba for the human rights, so and so. And I think that if we think very well, there is nothing else more anti-human rights than the embargo. Why? Because due to the embargo, a lot of people in my country have died. We have a lot of problems. Everybody blamed Castro, and the embargo is for Castro. But Castro is only one person, and in Cuba there are 11 million of persons that are suffering due to the embargo. So I don't think that we should blame Castro. Also, let's analyze in Miami. Why Miami? I mean, the people from Miami don't want to have the embargo finish, or the United States release the embargo. Why? Because nowadays that Cuba has an embargo, it's a big business for the people in Miami. Why? Well, because we have to think that, for instance, simple things like sending a letter from here, from Oklahoma, to my house, it's like $15. Because I have to send it, if I want to send dollars, or if I want to send a letter, a message, now that I have problem with the communications, so I have to send it to Miami through FedEx, and from Miami to Cuba, somebody that takes it, if it is not your friend or your relative, they charge you, and they charge you a lot of money. So even the simple detail of mail or a package, because you need to send a medicine, I've experienced this since I have been here. I wanted to send a present or medicine to my dad or to my mother or whatever. Or even when my daughter was in Cuba, I need to send things for her, and we have to pay $15 for each pound. So you think those people want the embargo to be released? Forget about it.
Y eso me parece que ha sido una buena jugada de la gente de Miami, porque ellos han tratado de ponerlo todo al revés. Bueno, hay cosas que ellos dicen que son ciertas, ¿no? Pero la mayoría de las cosas que la gente aquí en Estados Unidos sabe, eso es lo que la gente de Miami dice. Y ellos tratan de...
Government, as promised, has maintained the closest surveillance of the Soviet military buildup on the island of Cuba. Within the past week, unmistakable evidence has established the fact that a series of offensive missile sites is now in preparation on that imprisoned island. The purpose of these bases can be none other than to provide a nuclear strike capability against the Western Hemisphere. The characteristic of these new missile sites indicate two distinct types of installations. Several of them include medium-range ballistic missiles capable of carrying a nuclear warhead for a distance of more than 1,000 nautical miles. Each of these missiles, in short, capable of striking Washington, D.C., the Panama Canal, Cape Canaveral, Mexico City, or any other city in the southeastern part of the United States, in Central America, or in the Caribbean area. Additional sites not yet completed appear to be designed for intermediate range missiles capable of traveling more than twice as far and thus capable of striking most of the major cities in the Western Hemisphere. This urgent transformation of Cuba into an important strategic base by the presence of these large, long-range, and clearly offensive weapons of sudden mass destruction constitutes an explicit threat to the peace and security of all the Americas. The Soviet government publicly stated on September 11th that, and I quote, armaments and military equipment sent to Cuba are designed exclusively for defensive purposes, unquote. That there is, and I quote the Soviet government, there is no need for the Soviet government to shift its weapons for a retaliatory blow to any other country, for instance, Cuba, unquote. And that, and I quote the government, the Soviet Union has so powerful rockets to carry these nuclear warheads that there is no need to search for sites for them beyond the boundaries of the Soviet Union, unquote. That statement was false. Only last Thursday, as evidence of this rapid offensive buildup was already in my hand, Soviet Foreign Minister told me in my office that he was instructed to make it clear once again, as he said his government had already done, that Soviet assistance to Cuba, and I quote, pursued solely the purpose of contributing to the defense capabilities of Cuba, unquote. That, and I quote him, training by Soviet Cuban nationals in handling defensive armaments was by no means offensive. And that if it were otherwise, Mr. Gromyko went on, the Soviet government would never become involved in rendering such assistance, unquote. That statement also was false. The 1930s taught us a clear lesson. Aggression, if allowed to go unchecked and unchallenged, ultimately leads to war. This nation is opposed to war. We are also true to our word. Our unswerving objective, therefore, must be to prevent the use of